The next 3 days at the office were, by any reasonable measure, a mess. Not the dramatic kind, no blown deadlines, no public confrontations, no obvious implosions. That almost made it worse. On the surface, Julia was still showing up, still dressed impeccably, still speaking with authority. But beneath that veneer, something essential had slipped out of alignment. Focus, maybe, or certainty, or the quiet internal rhythm that had always kept her several steps ahead of everyone else. Simply put, they were the 3 most unproductive days she'd had in years. On Wednesday morning, she was prepping a client for cross-examination in a smaller, unrelated case, routine work she could usually do on autopilot. She reached into her briefcase for her annotated notes, the ones with color-coded tabs and margin reminders, and felt her stomach drop. They weren't there. She checked again, slowly, methodically, as if repetition might will them into existence. Nothing. The realization came with a delayed sting. The notes were still on her coffee table at home, neatly stacked beside a cold mug she vaguely remembered setting down days ago. She felt a flush of irritation rise, not at the mistake itself, but at the fact that she'd made it at all. Julia did not forget her notes. Ever. She recovered, of course. She always did. She improvised, leaned on memory, and no one in the room would have guessed anything was amiss. But as she left the conference room later, she felt unsettled. A hairline fracture had formed in her self-image, thin but unmistakable. Thursday was worse. She overslept. Not dramatically, no blaring alarms ignored for hours, but enough. 15 minutes late for a conference call with the firm's partners, a meeting she herself had helped schedule. The topic was significant, moving the firm's main office to a larger space downtown. Growth, expansion, visibility. The firm had nearly doubled in size over the last 3 years, due in no small part to Julia's success as a master litigator. She had built her reputation on reliability as much as brilliance. Being late wasn't just out of character, it was unthinkable. When she joined the call, breath slightly uneven, apologies crisp but sincere, there was a brief pause on the line. No one reprimanded her. No one even commented. But Julia felt it all the same, like a spotlight she couldn't quite escape. Friday, she didn't even try. She called out. She had her assistant clear her schedule entirely, citing a severe headache. That part was true. Her temples throbbed with a dull insistence that made light feel intrusive and sound abrasive. What she did not mention, what she carefully avoided considering too closely herself, was the empty bottle of Robert Mondavi sitting in her kitchen sink, consumed in its entirety the night before. It wasn't something she typically did. A glass with dinner, maybe 2 on particularly long nights. This had been different. This had been numbing, intentional. The kind of drinking that wasn't about taste or ritual, but about silence. Now she lay in bed, curtains drawn, phone face down on the nightstand. The headache pulsed in time with her thoughts, which refused to settle into anything orderly. None of this made sense to her. Julia did not unravel over small interactions. She had faced down hostile witnesses, aggressive opposing counsel, entire courtrooms primed to doubt her. She had lost cases before, real losses, with consequences far more tangible than wounded pride, and she had absorbed them, learned, moved on. So why couldn't she shake this? Lying there, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling she'd never bothered to fix, she tried to rationalize her current state of affairs. She approached it the only way she knew how, analytically. On what grounds did Brian become an authority figure in my life? The question annoyed her as soon as it surfaced. Authority implied power, influence. Brian had neither, at least not in any traditional sense. He wasn't a superior.
He wasn't a peer. He wasn't even part of her professional world. Did he really think of me as that bad of a person? That one landed harder.
She replayed the words he'd spoken outside the pizzeria. Calm, measured, final. No ill will. A boundary. A dismissal that wasn't cruel, but wasn't kind either. Just firm. Is it possible that he's not even thinking about me at all? That thought made her chest tighten in a way she didn't appreciate. Because it was plausible. Worse, it was likely. People like Brian moved on. They didn't ruminate. They didn't replay conversations in their heads days later, dissecting tone and intent. And then came the worst question, the one she couldn't quite bring herself to accept. What if all of it is true? What if she had been exactly as dismissive, as demeaning, as small as the memory suggested? What if Brian's reaction wasn't oversensitive or misinterpreted, but proportionate? What if the version of herself she'd glimpsed through his eyes was one she'd been avoiding for years? The headache throbbed harder. Eventually she forced herself out of bed and into the shower. Hot water pounded against her shoulders, steam filling the bathroom, washing away the lingering haze of wine and sleeplessness. She stood there longer than necessary, letting the physical sensation anchor her. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, hair damp and curling at the ends, something had shifted. She had reached a conclusion. If she was going to quiet the noise in her head, if she was going to reclaim even a fraction of the focus she'd lost, she was going to have to see Brian again. Just one more time. Not to persuade him of anything, not to rewrite the past, but to clear the air, to right the ship if such a thing was still possible. The thought brought a surprising mix of relief and anxiety. She sat on the edge of her bed and began to brainstorm, and immediately hated the comparison that sprang to mind. She felt like a teenage schoolgirl with a crush on the varsity quarterback. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. He quit his job as my driver, she thought. He asked me not to come back to his other job, all in an effort to not have to see me. The implications were not subtle. Have I eliminated all of my options? She ran through them anyway. Showing up at the car service again, unacceptable and futile. Returning to the pizzeria uninvited, he had been explicit. Calling the firm to track him down, unethical at best, humiliating at worst. She closed her eyes, rubbing her temples. Then she paused. No, there was one more. Not an ideal choice, not elegant, but it existed. I can order a pizza. The simplicity of it startled her. It slipped past her defences before she could dismiss it. A delivery, ordinary, anonymous. He wouldn't know it was her. He didn't know where she lived. He'd assume it was just like any other order. She stood and paced the length of her bedroom, the idea taking shape, refining itself. I'll place the order under a pseudonym. J. Plain, unremarkable, even a little conspicuous in its effort to be anonymous. She imagined it, the knock at the door, the brief exchange, the moment of recognition. She'd only need a couple of minutes, just enough time to say what she hadn't said properly before, to apologize without conditions, to leave nothing unsaid. That'll open the door one final time, she told herself, giving me the opportunity to finally make this right. She stopped pacing. The plan was imperfect, risky, possibly misguided. But for the first time in days, her thoughts aligned into something resembling resolve. Julia reached for her phone and called Little Sicily's restaurant.